Hey everybody, welcome to your horoscopes for the week. These are the horoscopes for the week ending April 29th, our last full week of April. Already, that's kind of crazy. This is our first full week of the Mercury retrograde as well. We have a full Taurus retrograde, which started at the end of last week. So this is really our first full week of it. And we've got some moon action going on this week. So let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to start as we always do with Aries. No moon action for you guys. That was last week. We're moving on out of that. The sun has moved out, so basically we're down to Jupiter. We continue to have that Jupiter influence in your sign. That is actually going to end here in the next few weeks as Jupiter is moving. It's 24 degrees this week. We only go to about 28, 29. So basically, Jupiter is going to be moving out here pretty soon in the next month or so. May come back later when it goes retrograde, and then leave again permanently for the next several years. Jupiter is in a sign for a year at a time, basically. So we're looking at the next 12 years or so without Jupiter's influence. Jupiter square with Pluto is a little bit of a challenge with Jupiter being focused on your career goals. And Pluto is focused right there on the cusp of your relationships as well as your day-to-day schedule. So this kind of plays out to me as either some of those people that you love, that you have formed relationships with, either getting in the way of your career goals, maybe on purpose, maybe not on purpose. Also, this problem is coming up in your day-to-day schedule, period. So I do see some challenges around having to reschedule different things. There are some challenges around delays. We're in a Mercury retrograde. None of that is uncommon during a Mercury retrograde anyway. So a little extra patience definitely helps with that. The other thing is that I feel like, because Jupiter is all about expansion, and specifically expansion in your career goals. So if we are dealing with delays and miscommunications, again, that P word is coming in, patience really does help you get through that without it being such a burden, if that makes sense. So what we're trying to avoid here is frustrations becoming a bad day. Small frustrations, even a lot of small frustrations during the day, doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad day. It just means that you had to deal with some frustrations, you had some patience, you got through them, you moved on to the next thing. So that's what I have for you guys this week. If you love your horoscopes, please do send me a copy. Click the link in the description below and send me a copy. I would really appreciate it. And we're moving on to Taurus, where all the action really is we got that Mercury retrograde in Taurus this week for the full week. Actually, it is a full Taurus retrograde. So Mercury's not leaving Taurus during its retrograde. We just got so close to being in conjunction with Uranus there, and as it starts to going into retrograde, it's moving away from that conjunction, moving into eventually a conjunction with the sun as the sun moves into Taurus as well, because this is our first full week of Taurus season on top of that. So lots of really fun stuff going on for you guys. Couple of things at the beginning of the week. The sun is in a square with Pluto. Of course, it moves out of that square as we move through the week. Pluto, right at the beginning of the week, is focused right on the cusp of your relationships and your day-to-day duties. And the sun, of course, is focused on your career. So there's some interesting things going on here. One is that either your personal or professional relationships, there may be something going on within those relationships that is infiltrating into your focus on your long-term career goals, if that makes sense. My best advice for something like that is to let people either schedule time for them specifically, so they're not constantly infiltrating in the time that you have allotted for your career goals. The other thing is that I really feel that it's necessary when it comes to professional career relationships, because we're in a Mercury retrograde and because it's in Taurus and because Mercury is sort of influencing all of these different planets that are in Taurus right now. This is really a time where you're going to see, you may not have been able to see clearly whether some of these professional relationships are really working for you or not. I feel like during the Mercury retrograde, all of those red flags are going to come up like a whole lot. So pay attention. The red flags are there for a reason. They're there to let you know that this person may not be as supportive in your career goals as maybe they've been letting on up until now. So you'll really start to see those red flags a little bit more clearly this week, I feel. Also, Mercury and Uranus move into a sextile with Mars. Mars continues to be focused on that inner trauma place, is influenced by Cancer, but still really much focusing on that inner trauma. So we're getting some anger from our from our past trauma coming up in the form of triggers. Now, triggers to me are a very useful tool. I have heard a lot of people talk about how, well, this triggers me, so don't do it anymore. If something triggers you, it's completely up to you to figure out why it's triggering you and what part of you needs to be healed. It is not something to use as an excuse to get people to stop communicating in a certain way or saying things that are quote unquote triggering you. And I think that this is a really big deal in the world right now, because I'm seeing it just so much in terms of people using the words specifically to get other people to stop different behaviors. If you want those people to stop those behaviors, there's another way. But telling them that they're triggering you is definitely not the way to go. Triggers are your own personal responsibility, and a lot of things, a lot of wonderful things come up from triggers. It isn't a very emotionally taxing experience, but understanding the root, because the trigger is actually triggering an emotional response from an old trauma root. So this is anger that you've been holding on to for who knows how long, that has probably been getting in the way and holding you back in a million different ways. So we don't want to do that anymore. These triggers are coming up to allow you to heal that part of yourself, to accept and let go of the pain that you've been holding on to around this trauma. Another misconception in the world is that you never are able to get rid of your trauma, and that's not entirely accurate. Yes, there are events that took place that caused trauma. There's nothing you can do about that specifically. But you do have complete control over whether or not you're continuing to hold on to this anger. So while we're in a Mercury retrograde and you're dealing with triggers, it's doubly important to work through your triggers rather than letting your triggers express what it is that you want to say. Because when your triggers talk for you, it never goes in the direction that you want it to go in. So bottom line, extra patience, of course, because there is a Mercury retrograde. It is in Taurus. You're probably going to be affected by it a whole lot because it is in your sign. That extra patience is really going to help, and being open to the trigger healing process is definitely something that's going to be helpful for you. So that is what I have for you guys this week, and a kitty tail in case you needed that. If you love your horoscopes, please do click on the link down below and send me a coffee. I would greatly appreciate it. And we're going to go ahead and move on to Gemini. What do we got going on Gemini? Well, we're going to start off, we're going to kick off the week with the moon in Gemini, actually, in conjunction with Venus, which is also in Gemini. And these planets are not necessarily interacting with other planets, which is not a bad thing, really, especially when we have a Mercury retrograde going on right now. Mercury is Gemini's ruling planet. It rules Gemini as well as Virgo. So both signs share this planet. So even though the planets that are in your sign are not necessarily interacting with Mercury right now, that doesn't mean that it's not going to have some sort of effect on you because it's your ruling planet. When your ruling planet goes retrograde, a lot of interesting things really come up, and specifically around communication. This is very important. Geminis are high communicators. Okay. Geminis and Aquarians. I'm an Aquarian myself, so I understand this. We tend to talk too much. And so the Mercury retrograde is sort of helping us to choose words that get to the point faster so we don't lose our audience. Also, with Venus being very much a part of this in your sign, we're talking about adding a new level of creativity to what you've already done. So one of the things that really comes up with this for me is it's very typical of us as we get older to get set in specific patterns, and mutable signs are no different than that. It's the big difference between mutable signs and fixed signs is fixed signs get set in that sort of routine much quicker than the mutable signs do. But as they get older, they still do fall into those, you know, kind of routine type things. I think for Geminis, what's really important here is that routine is like the enemy when it comes to Geminis. They really like to kick things up and make sure that they're not doing the same thing over and over again. It gets really boring. So adding Venus's creativity to this is really fantastic for all of you Geminis for a number of different reasons. And to kick off the week with Venus in a conjunction with the moon just adds a little bit more power to what you're trying to put into your creative influences. So it's just about basically it's just about kicking up that monotony a little bit so that things aren't quite so routine. We want to change that a little bit. We want to add something to our lives that is a little bit out of the norm as well. And I feel like this week is a perfect opportunity for you to do just that. Regardless of what it is that you're adding to your life. And it's really important to focus on your mind and how your mind thinks. We tend to overthink everything. Geminis are definitely no exception to that. In fact, they're very much known for that. So you want to take your minds over analyzing what you're doing out of it, basically. We are very good at talking ourselves out of doing things. And we're not necessarily trying to set up a goal that's going to take lots and lots of steps. We're just adding a little bit something that boosts our creativity into what we're already doing. So don't make this bigger than it really needs to be, is what I'm trying to say here. So that's what I have for you guys this week. If you love your horoscopes, please do send me a coffee. Click the link below in the description. I would really appreciate it. And we are moving on to Cancer. We are going to continue to have Mars in Cancer, continuing to bring our focus into our inner trauma place. As a matter of fact, the sign itself is moving into that space anyway. So we're dealing with anger. We're dealing with old anger that has been brought on or created by traumas that happened before in our lives. For most people, that's childhood, but that covers early adulthood as well. And depending on how old you are, it covers every decade of your life, basically. So we can be holding on to trauma that happened a week ago, honestly. And we're just not ready to let it go yet, if that makes sense. Everybody say hi to Emrys. He's decided that he's going to join the video today, or at least part of him anyways. So as we get into Tuesday, the moon also moves into Cancer as well, moving into conjunction with Mars. Now we're talking about lots of emotional stuff really coming into mix with that anger. So to me, honestly, this is one of those unfortunate challenges or unfortunate situations where you're really being triggered and a lot of stuff is coming up. My advice around that is always take the time to work through your trauma and make sure you're taking time to work through it and get yourself out of the blame game place. This is really important. You can't work through a trigger if you're still blaming other people for it, basically, or if you're insisting that they apologize, or if you're insisting they change their behavior. You're giving them your power. The truth is that for most of us, oh my goodness, Emrys, for most of us, we're not going to get an apology, and we're not going to get changed behavior, and we're not going to get any of the things that we want. We have to heal this part of ourselves while accepting the situation for what it is. And that's always the hard part for us human beings. And I think Cancers really have a difficulty in this because being such an emotional sign, Cancers tend to hold on to things very, very, very deeply, and they don't necessarily want to let it go. It's almost like there's some mistaken belief that this trauma is what makes me who I am, and that's not necessarily true. How you handle the trauma is what makes you who you are. Toughening up because of the trauma is not necessarily the way that we want to go. I mean, yes, to a certain extent, that is true. I've had lots and lots and lots of experience with narcissists, so I'm a very tough person, and the red flags from narcissism are like boom right there. That doesn't mean I have to beat them up. It does mean that I know whether I can trust them or not trust them, whether I should give them the time of day or not give them the time of day. It does allow me, that experience does allow me to protect myself, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to go around projecting that I'm constantly protecting myself, if that makes any sense at all. So I feel like, especially around the time the moon moves into conjunction with Mars, some of this old stuff is really going to be coming up. Take the time to understand it, to accept it, to embrace it, to let it go, and specifically to identify where you're allowing that trauma to hold you back in whatever it is that you want to do. So that's what I have for you guys this week. If you love your horoscopes, send me a copy. Click the link below, and I would really appreciate it. And if you're having trouble with that link, please let me know. I will see what's up with that. We're going to go ahead and move on to Leo, who gets the moon on Thursday, moving into a T-square with the sun as well as Pluto. Couple of things are going to take place with this. Now, luckily, it's only happening for one day, so that is good. And a T-square is a pretty big major challenge. Focuses on self. The moon's focus is very much on your emotional self. Pluto's focus is on your day-to-day schedule. And then we have the sun's focus, which is very much on our career. Now, when you're emotional, that is going to have an effect on any of the energy that you're going to put into anything. So if we're focused specifically on work, this may create a little bit of a challenge for you. And Pluto is all about your personal power, your source of your own personal power. So it may feel like you don't have any power over your schedule at all. So this is sort of what's infiltrating this, I feel, is that there's a lot of reschedules or appointments maybe that fall off of your schedule or something like that, which is creating an emotional response for you. Most people get really freaked out when that happens. And the more freaked out you get, the more that energy is going into everything that you do continue to have set up. And that could be a problem for you. And you want to definitely avoid that. So we're looking at Thursday, this happening about Thursday. It is just for one day. As we move on to the next day, the moon is still there, but it's in a little bit of a less difficult place. We do continue to have a square between the moon and the sun and that Mercury retrograde, which of course we're full on into this week as well. So communication is important. You don't want your emotions to communicate for you. Number one, you do not want your emotions to communicate for you, especially in business. It's really feels like it's rude to say, but when in terms of business, nobody cares how you feel. They care about what you can do for them, period. So you're going to have to separate those two as much as possible so that it doesn't infiltrate into your success in your career. We also, the moon moves into a grand sextile with Venus and Jupiter at the same time. This is a more favorable aspect as these planets are moving to or working together with each other. Venus is very much focused on your support system, and Jupiter is focused on expansion of your career. So this opens up and sort of shows you various different avenues for support in terms of expanding in your career, which is very helpful. And it could be very helpful too, specifically if this support is supportive around anything that's emotional coming up for you as well. So it seems like a lot, but really once that moon leaves your sign and will be full out by the middle of Saturday, things will calm down just a little bit for you. So that's what I have for you guys this week. If you love your horoscopes, please consider sending me a copy. Click the link below. I would really appreciate it. And we are going to move on to Virgo. We have the moon moving into Virgo right at the end of the week, moving into a trine with Jupiter, as well as an opposition with Saturn. So let's talk about that opposition first. An opposition with Saturn. Saturn's focus is on money. The moon's focus is on the past. This is going to bring up issues that you have with your finances that are is an issue that seems to be a pattern. So if it's a pattern, you need to fix that pattern. That's basically what that comes down to. In terms of the moon's trine with Jupiter, Jupiter is focused very much on career right now. So this is all about expanding your career. These issues with finances could be fueling that need to expand in your career for sure. Obviously, if you need more money coming in. So in that way, the money issues are sort of working in your favor just a little bit, at least helping you out just a little bit to make the right decisions, if that makes any sense at all. Outside of the very end of the day, there is no planets in Virgo. We do continue to have Ceres in Virgo. Ceres continues to be retrograde throughout this week. All about mirroring that need for nurturing yourself back at you. And Ceres focus is still on the mind and how you think. So it's about creating nurturing thoughts towards yourself, which I find interesting because I feel like what's really coming out of this Taurus retrograde this time is fixing our self-talk, if that makes sense. And while there's no planets coming in to interact with that Mercury retrograde, this is still going to be something that comes up for you an awful lot because it's really a big focus of the Mercury retrograde. So when we're talking about your own personal thoughts, it's really important to pay attention to whether or not these thoughts need to be nurtured. For instance, if your first thought when you do something is always, I did my best, I probably didn't do as well as I could, but I did my best. If that's your first thought, that's a negative thought. I did my best is perfectly fine. It doesn't need anything to follow it up. But most of the time, we human beings are very sort of, it's like we have trained ourselves that we always have to put ourselves down in some way. And that's really something that, in terms of what's going on with the Mercury retrograde, we really need to work on. And I feel that that's a big focus for you guys throughout the week. And the moon coming in at the end of the week will sort of test that theory a little bit to see just how well you worked on your internal process, because obviously if your internal process is a little bit screwy, unfortunately, it ain't going to work out very well for you. So the most you can do at the beginning of the week, it will definitely help you towards the end of the week when the moon comes into your sign. So that is what I have for you guys this week. And if you love your horoscopes, please do send me a coffee. Click the link below in the description. I would greatly appreciate it. And we're going to move on to Libra. Focus continues to be on the home this week. We are full on in Mercury retrograde. This is usually about the time Mercury is rules any kind of machinery, anything with moving parts. So if anything is gonna decide it doesn't want to work anymore, usually during the Mercury retrograde is that time. But also, you may also be experiencing some things that seemed to work fine last week, and all of a sudden you're getting these little signs that maybe it might not be working as well as it should. Very important, especially during a Mercury retrograde, to get those things looked at. I'm sorry. As quickly as possible. I literally fended that yawn off for the last 3 signs, and it finally caught up with me. I'm very, very sorry. So yeah, that is really important to make sure that you are properly maintaining everything at home, to make sure that it is as fully functional as possible. Specifically around this time of year, air conditioning. If you live somewhere that is really, really hot, this is always a good time of the year to make sure that you get that maintenance done ASAP. You don't want to turn on your air conditioner on a hot day and find that it doesn't work. So definitely look into those things this week. During the Mercury retrograde, not getting it done means a lot more money to fix it. Getting the maintenance done, even during a Mercury retrograde, is definitely the way to go. The other thing that, oh my goodness, I think you all need a nap too. Maybe I do also. The other thing I feel that's coming up for you guys currently this week is communications within the home or within the people that are closest to you. Because we're in a Mercury retrograde, really important that your communication is as clear and to the point as possible, and that you make sure you understand exactly what somebody else is saying. So if you have any question at all, it's definitely good to clarify before you run off thinking that you know what they're talking about, and really you don't, if that makes sense. These little things happen all the time, and while miscommunications are a big deal in, say, business and your goals and things like that, they're really a big deal within your inner circle as well. I think that most people ignore communication problems within their family more than anywhere else, and that is just not a good idea. When you ignore these types of communication issues, you run into needing boundaries, you run into people walking all over you. You just don't want to deal with any of that, and Mercury's retrograde is really going to bring that to the surface. So make sure you're aware of that, and you're open to the lessons that Mercury is wanting to teach you right now. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And if you love your horoscopes, please consider sending me a coffee. Click the link below. I would greatly appreciate it. And we are moving on to Scorpio, where we are kind of moving into a space where we are in between influences as we get to the end of the week. But for the majority of the week, we are focused on those we love, which is a wonderful thing. Can be an annoying thing too, honestly. I'm a mother. I have children. I love my children more than life itself. I would probably kill anybody that hurt one of my children, even though they're grown men and they can take care of themselves. And yet they can be some of the most annoying people I've ever met in the entire world. And the worst part is that I made them and brought them into the world. And I think that relationship in itself always is very strained between the parent and child, because we have expectations and they have expectations, and those expectations don't always meet up, if that makes sense. And of course, we're not just talking about children, but any of our closest relationships, we sort of talk ourselves into, I can completely and totally rely on this person. And then there's always something that comes up that proves that you can't, and for whatever reason. And it's not always because the person is unreliable. There's various different reasons why this would come up. So it's really important, especially during a Mercury retrograde, which we are in, really important to have some extra patience, to make sure that that you're communicating things in the right way. If we're dealing with family members, specifically spouses and children, or siblings and parents, people that you're very, very, very closely linked to, these miscommunications are going to come up a lot. And they always cause problems when they do, because then you wind up with somebody who feels like nobody ever listens to them, or you're the person that feels like that nobody's ever listening to you. And it just causes a big old emotional mess. And who wants to get into a big old emotional mess if we can avoid that, right? So a couple of things coming up with that. First of all, when you make plans, it's really good to double check and make sure that everybody is on the same page with those plans. Also, boundaries are really important for all relationships, and the closer the relationship, the stronger the boundaries really need to be. Let's face it, if we were to look at this honestly, um, I would say the majority of us, as we turned from child to adult, took our parents for granted. We didn't want to listen to what they had to say. They lived in the old world and we're creating the new world, so all of their experiences didn't matter at all. Of course, I learned as I got older that's not necessarily the case. But we don't want to find ourselves back in that same situation. But we also want to be open to understanding where other people are coming from in terms of where they are at in that particular situation. One of the things that I do with my kids, specifically because I'm well aware I didn't listen to anything. My parents were the stupidest people on the planet when I was 18 years old. I'm not saying that they are stupid now, but taking that into consideration with my own children, remembering my mindset at the time, and then looking at it from that mindset in order to help them or not help them. So for instance, if they come to me with their problems, it's just ingrained in me to give advice. Let me help you fix this problem. And not everybody wants a fix to the problem. So I have started to implement, I have some advice if you would like it. If they say no, I keep it to myself. If they say yes, they're actually more willing to take that advice than they would if I just offered it without asking, if that makes sense. It at least gives them the choice to take it or leave it, if that makes sense. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And if you love your horoscopes, consider sending me a coffee. I would greatly appreciate it. Click the link below for all the details. And we are moving into Sagittarius. We are moving out of focus on our day-to-day schedule, moving into a space where you're sort of in between focuses this week. So there really isn't anything to focus on, which is kind of cool. It's like you get to pick and choose what you want to focus on, or on the negative, you could be dealing with everything all at once. And during a Mercury retrograde, that's not really a lot of fun. But if anybody can handle it, you guys can, right? No planets coming into Sagittarius this week, including the moon. We will be dealing with the moon next week. So let's just go ahead and enjoy our moon-free week this week. With Mercury being retrograde, I feel that it's very important, especially when you're in between focuses currently right now. It's really important. First of all, patience is extremely important. Listening is really extremely important. Most of the Sagittarians that I know, and I'm not saying that Sagittarians don't listen, but a lot of times your brains are going so quickly when you're listening to somebody that it's like your brain's going and your mouth wants to go before you're done listening. And the issue with that is, well, two things will come up. One, that can be really difficult for the other person, specifically if you're going through that issue with somebody else where they're not listening to you. So this is sort of mirroring that problem back at you if that is your problem. But the other thing that can be very frustrating about this is that if you're not listening to the people around you, you're also not getting all the information that you should be getting. And if you're not getting all the information that you should be getting, mistakes are going to be made, period. So obviously, in certain circumstances, if you don't completely follow the directions, somebody might get hurt, right? This may not be one of those situations, but you don't want to cause or be the cause of delays or miscommunications or anything like that simply because you're not present in the conversation. So that's one of the things that I really feel is coming up for you guys a lot this week. The other thing that I feel is going to be coming up for you guys this week also is that I kind of feel like it's going to become very, very clear this week more so than any other week in terms of boundaries with the people that are closest to you. Because we're starting off the week with that focus, you're going to find there's always those people in your life that really need heavy, heavy, heavy boundaries. People who just tend to take advantage. And I find that the people that are closest to us are the ones that do that the most, because think about it. If you're going to take advantage of anybody, you're going to take advantage of people that you know are going to love you in the end of it. And you're going to take advantage of people that you have already learned to manipulate, and you're going to take advantage of people that basically have a legal requirement to keep loving you afterwards. So or that you are legally required to keep loving them. And you can still love them, but boundaries are still really, really important. And you're going to find this week more and more and more of those relationships that you didn't realize needed healthy boundaries really do need healthy boundaries. So that's what I have for you guys this week. If you love your horoscopes, please consider sending me a copy. Click the link below in the description. I would greatly appreciate it. And we are going to move on to Capricorn, where Capricorn is focused on a perfectly laid out schedule, day-to-day schedule with Pluto. He's technically still in Aquarius, but right on the cusp still. Pluto takes a really long time to move anywhere. You'd think he was a big, heavy planet, but he's really tiny. And the issue with, or the reason why it takes Pluto so long to move, is because he's so far away. And that's really why that is. So his movement actually looks very slow from our vantage point here on Earth. Couple of things going on here. First and foremost, Pluto continues to be in a square with Jupiter all week long this week, with focus on your day-to-day schedule. Pluto being your source of power, your ability to change and transform your life into what you want it to be. When there's a challenge with a planet that rules expansion in your career, this may actually bring up some obstacles towards achieving your career goals, if that makes sense. We are continuing a sextile with Neptune, however. Now, Neptune is focused on your long-term goals. And this is actually very interesting. I find personally that there are certain aspects of my life that just aren't working sometimes. So I'm so uber focused. Let's say I'm so uber focused on career change that I'm not paying attention to my other goals. So I also feel that there are times where the universe actually prevents you from moving forward in the goals that you're trying to focus on purpose, so that you can place your focus in a different place, which is going to help your career expansion later on anyway. So anything that we're avoiding doing, the things will happen to make us focus on what it is that we're avoiding, if that makes sense. We do not have any other planets moving into Capricorn this week, which is good. We are still in a Mercury retrograde, so of course any kind of delays in your schedule are just going to happen. You've got to be as flexible as you possibly can. I know how you Capricorns work. You like to make a schedule and you like to stick to it. And life just doesn't always let us do that, if that makes sense. So rather than fighting against it, as flexible as you can is really the way to go, or in order to make sure you get through it as easy as and as quickly as possible. So that's what I have for you guys this week. If you love your horoscopes, consider sending me a coffee. Click the link below in the description. I would greatly appreciate it. And we are moving on to Aquarius. Focus is on relationships this week, although we do have a bit of an influence of our day-to-day schedule with Pluto influencing that. Pluto square with Jupiter is going to cause a little bit of a challenge here, specifically on Thursday, Thursday, when the moon moves into opposition with Pluto in Leo. And the moon is very much focused on self. So what's going to happen with that there's some emotional stuff that's coming up around that, obviously, being that the moon is very much a part of that. And that may get in the way of you expanding in those career goals, if that makes sense. And that is a little bit of a challenge for Aquarians, because emotional stuff, we don't do emotional stuff, right? It's entirely not true. We do emotional stuff all day long. We're just really, really good at making it seem like we don't. But we're lying. It's true. It's true. We're lying. Most people don't know what I'm feeling when I'm feeling it. I keep it very, very bottled up inside, or I wear a very good mask to make sure that, people don't see what I'm going through. And that's not necessarily because I'm embarrassed by it. There are just a million different instances in life where that is simply not appropriate. So I try and keep it out of that place as much as possible. However, if it gets to the point where it's just too much, allow yourself to have that emotional release. It is Mercury retrograde after all. We are dealing with challenges within our day-to-day schedule changes, those type for a fixed sign. Those things are very frustrating to have to get through. However, I deal with my schedule changes as and when I am dealing with them. And I try to look at the positive side. What is good about the fact that my schedule changed? Well, one of the things that's good is I just gained an extra hour to do something else. Even if that's an hour for me specifically. And if you're going through an emotional release, you're going to need at least an hour for you anyways to work through that process and be able to move past it so it's not ruling your life anymore, if that makes sense. Pluto continues to be in a sextile with Neptune, which is interesting also. Neptune is the planet of intuition and rules all of our intuitive abilities. But Neptune also is a planet that rules very deep emotional traumas in some cases, focused on our long-term goals. I really feel that this challenge is coming up because it's showing us that we're ignoring other goals that we may have put in place as well. So two things about that. One, make sure that you don't have so many goals going that you can't handle all of them. That is a very typical Aquarian trait. The other thing is that I feel like in many cases we tend to focus too much on one thing and not expanding on all the other things we need to focus on. So this sextile is actually showing you that if you're having frustrations in one area, you have other goals to focus on, and maybe if you focus your energy on that in for a time, the other challenges will sort of work themselves out. Last thing I have for you guys is, of course, we are in a Mercury retrograde. We can't forget to talk about the fact that this is the first full week of Mercury retrograde. So any kind of patience is good. Communication issues, any kind of negative communication patterns that you have going on or that you're using right now are so going to be mirrored back at you in a very annoying way. And if it annoys you a lot, chances are it is trying to show you that there's a reason why it's annoying you. It's something that you have to fix within yourself as well. So do keep that in mind and do look at it as honestly as possible. The more honestly you look at yourself, the more ability you have to fix issues that may need to be fixed. So that's what I have for you guys this week. If you love your horoscopes, please consider sending me a copy. Click the link below in the description. I would really appreciate it. And we are finally at Pisces. We continue to have Saturn in Pisces focused on finances. We also have Neptune in Pisces focused on long-term goals. So we're really focused on our financial goals here in many ways. Saturn is all about responsibility and showing you your responsibility to your finances, which is very interesting actually, because I have seen a lot of people blaming other people for their financial problems. And the truth is that if you're in a situation where somebody else is affecting your financial problems, you need to get out of that situation rather than point the finger at them and say it's all their fault. We don't want to give our power away to another individual. And Neptune sextile with Pluto is all about that, really, because Pluto is our personal source of power. It's all about personal transformation. And Neptune is like, hey, while you're pointing the finger at that guy, you're also giving them all your power. And it's sort of a reminder that this is what you're doing. So this week really is all about understanding what you have control over and doing whatever it takes to make sure that you put into place what needs to be put into place so that you can be financially successful, if that makes sense. Money issues and poverty, these are huge things going on in the world that have always been a challenge. And up until the last couple hundred years, you were stuck in that situation. You were capped at what you could do because, let's face it, there were certain groups of people and you couldn't leave your group. Now that's completely different. You can be born the most poor person on to the most poor family on the planet, and you could be rich by the time you're 18 years old. It just depends on what you choose to put, the energy you choose to put towards that, in order to be successful. And nobody is responsible for your success but you. So you really do want to keep that in mind, for sure. We also continue to have a sextile between Saturn and the Sun, which means with Saturn pointing at your finances and the Sun very much pointed at your career, this is a very good time to make a little extra money this week, as long as you are open to the possibilities and you are open to doing whatever needs to be done to make that money, if that makes sense. Neptune also continues to be in a square with Venus, which is kind of interesting. Venus is very much focused on your support system. So it may feel like you're doing this completely and totally on your own. I tell women specifically, every woman I've ever talked to, don't rely on a man to pay your bills. You take care of your own stuff. And yet I've been married for 30 years. Was a stay-at-home mom for a while. That's why I started this business while I was a stay-at-home mom. I'm learning that I can't rely on another person to pay my bills. I have to be able to do that myself, and not because I'm not making enough money, or the fact that they're not making enough money. It's just, you are a victim to another person's choices if you allow yourself to be that victim. So this really, for me personally, I've been going through this a lot. It's one of those very difficult moments when you realize that what you want doesn't matter. You have to put into place what you need to do to make sure that you are taking care of your commitments, if that makes sense. That's what I have for you guys this week. And if you love your horoscopes, do consider sending me a coffee. Click the link in the description. I would really appreciate it. And that's all I have for everybody this week. Thanks so much for hanging out. I'm Melissa Bruce, the heavy metal psychic. I will see you guys next week. Make it a great week, everybody.